Hello and welcome to the Game Cupboard. My name's Rick and this is my good friend Gabriel Rules, and this is our non-spoiler review of Final Fantasy VII, the remake that just came out for the PlayStation 4. So we're going to talk initial thoughts and then go over things in a little bit more detail, such as graphics, music, gameplay elements, and all things like that. So to start off, when you finish drinking, what did you think?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it so far. I've now clocked about 75 hours. Did the main story and the side missions probably about 48 hours. Probably could have done it sooner, but I just spent a lot of time going around and absorbing the world, the story, and then mostly trophy hunting after that. But we're that's not going to be finished now. So yes, and I think we both had some good time with it, haven't we? You're trying to chip your way through hard mode now, which admittedly is too hard for me.
So yeah, I've put about 51 hours so far into it. I finished it at around 43, 44 hours, and I've just been chipping away at hard mode for about 5 or 6 hours now. Yeah, I love it. There's some decisions that were made that I don't like.
Yeah.
It started off as things that I was unsure about, but then as the story progressed and as we came to end it, it went from being unsure to like genuinely just not liking it. It didn't detract from my love of the game though, which is really important, and I think that saved it, if you know what I mean, because for me it didn't stick the landing, but everything up until that point was so good and so solid that I'm like, okay.
I think it's fair to say about 95% of it is pretty solid.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We can talk about this a little bit because it's right at the beginning, but we just won't reveal who they are, what they are, until the next video. But we'll call them the weird hooded things. Let's just say
hood ghosts. We'll call them hood ghosts.
Yeah, the weird hood ghosts. They appear at the very beginning. You don't know who they are, what they're about, but it was clear that they weren't in the main story to begin with. And that's obviously, for someone that knows the game, you're like, okay, this is all new. You're like, I don't understand why they're here, and they just seem to be there for no other reason than to ruin your shit. So I'm like, yeah, I wasn't fully convinced by them, and they just felt like a nuisance, and it just felt like something was sort of being shoehorned in. And then you do find out who they are, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, that was one of the things that was also consistent through the story that really didn't sit well with me.
Yeah, that was the first thing about the story that I didn't like. There's a lot of expansion on the original story, and I appreciate so much about, I don't want to call it filler or padding because that sounds kind of detrimental to it, because I think a lot of it was really solid world building, and it made me care about characters that I didn't care about in the original, and it made the world feel bigger than it felt in the original. And when you get to the open world in the original game, then it starts to feel big. Midgar just felt like a small slice of pie, but here it does feel like a fully realized city, and you really feel the ramifications of everything that's happening, and it adds a more, I suppose, realistic time frame or element of time frame to it, and it kind of makes everyone's action seem a little bit more impactful. And I think
it takes the time to work with the characters, their reactions, the world they live in. I think one of the things that I always loved about the remake is wherever you go, you can just move the camera up to the sky, and you can just see the plates above you, and that's like, it's just this constant reminder about where you are and the kind of world that these characters live in. And obviously, that's something you could never really see in the original. So I think that way, just with little small touches like that are so significant when you just see, as Aerith calls it, the iron sky. And yeah, you kind of, I think that when we understand that and you see it for yourself and you see the slums and you see the characters that are involved, rather than just sort of being rushed through, you really do see the characters' reactions, how they deal with, everything that's going on. And I think that just really opens up so much more of the story that it does, as you say, it doesn't feel padded at all. It feels like it's actually, the unabridged version.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, the unabridged version, because going back to the original now, it does feel like heavily abridged. The thing that I appreciate about it as well, I don't know if this is spoilers or not, but I appreciate the focus on, or not really a focus, but there is more time given to actual Shinra employees, not the management, not the bigwigs, but the people who need jobs and the people who are just working for this company. And it does a great job of humanizing a corporation that was just seen as the enemy, but showing that no, there is human elements to this. It's not everybody, and it adds a conflict to sort of like character perception of Shinra.
I think the game does a really good job at showing all sides of the moral compass.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the thing that it does, again, without trying to go too much into spoiler territory, it does do a good job at making sure that all sides of the arguments are seen.
Yeah.
And I think that it does a really good job with that, because it's not just Avalanche's point of view, it's also Shinra's point of view. Like, yeah, you do have the bad guys. You know, Heidegger's clearly the bad guy. There's no denying that these people are the definition of evil. But at the same time, I think it's, you know, for, as you say, the sake of the employees, many of the people that work there. I mean, I've had this issue before, you know, like in previous gigs I've done, sometimes jobs for big pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, they might not be Umbrella, but it's really frustrating because obviously, you know, you see firsthand, you know, like what these people are capable of, and like, you know, how much money and how they screw many people over. But then, of course, you know, the people that work in there are just, you know, like you and me, and that's, in some ways, it kind of is more frustrating because it humanizes them in a way. And I think it's not there to tell you this is right or this is wrong. I mean, yeah, like you've got your bad guys and you've got your good guys, but then you do have the people in between who are either apathetic or they're just ignorant or they just have no idea. And I think that's very true to life, and I think that adds a lot of dimension and a lot of kind of arguments that, you know, are kind of told from all sides.
So we can't really get into any more about the story without going into full spoiler territory at the moment.
No, I'm up against the line here.
Yeah, I'm walking the line as well. I'm like, there's lots that I want to talk about, but that's going to be in the spoiler video.
We'll come back to that.
So make sure that you stick around for the spoiler video, which will be coming out shortly after this one. It'll probably take a little bit longer because it's going to be considerably longer. But let's get into what did you think to the gameplay. Obviously, there's a lot of changes compared to the original game. The original was a single camera angle, isometric almost, on static backgrounds, no camera control, turn-based battles. This has been completely rebuilt from the ground up. Fully realised 3D worlds, real-time action combat with a spin on the active time battle system to create a combat system that I personally feel is absolutely incredible and one of the best combat systems I've played within a game for years.
Totally.
It's unreal.
I mean, first of all, I'm kind of disappointed that circle's not the main action button now. Because it was weird because when the original came out in 97, you know, we were still used to cross being the main action button for everything, and this game had just been ported from Japan, you know, relatively badly translated, and you know,
the localization was pretty poor.
But the thing is in Japan, like, circle's always the action button because in Japanese that means yes and cross means no. But it's weird because in this one they decided to make triangle the action button for many things. It's almost like someone there just said, "Oh, I don't think we ever used triangle enough as a button. Let's make that the action button for most things this time." That's really odd.
That threw me as well because I'm so used to again, the original. There's going to be a lot of comparisons to the original. It's a remake. It's impossible not to. So if you are getting annoyed with us referring to the original, I do apologise.
It's a remake. We're allowed.
Yeah, it's going to happen. So. The amount of times that I'd try and open, especially at the beginning of the game, that I'd press triangle to try and open the menu, and it didn't work. And I was like, what's going on? Oh, I've got to press options. And then I go into the menu. The controls in this are more akin to something like... or just something more action-based, like Devil May Cry or Code Vein or something, where you've got square and triangle for attack. It's circle dodge?
Circle's dodge. But that confused me as well, because one thing that we've both picked up on is that this game plays very much like Yakuza does.
Yes.
And in doing that, like the way that you go around the world, the way that the side missions work, I mean, Yakuza's not Yakuza, it's not the definitive thing. It's not the first game that's done this. I've seen things on this that even Sonic 06, which I shamefully works on, did as well. But I think, like when you're in the battle system, I'm used to playing like using crosses dodge,
Yeah.
because Yakuza does that, and in this it's circles, so you have to relearn a few of the mappings, but it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
But I think when you're running around, it's really great. Hold R2 to sprint, and you sprint super fast as well, so you do feel like you can get from A to B pretty quickly.
What's nice about the sprint as well is that there's no stamina gauge. A lot of games when you're sprinting have a stamina gauge now.
Yeah.
So you can only sprint for a few steps. This doesn't, and it just lets you traverse even really like big areas, or well, long areas. It's quite a linear map, but it lets you get through the long areas really quite quickly, which I enjoyed. I thought that was really welcome.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like obviously random battles aren't there anymore for obvious reasons, but I think they've taken, I mean, because I've not played that many recent FF games, but they've taken one thing that Final Fantasy 15 did really well, is that you can see the battles coming up ahead of you. I mean, Final Fantasy 15 was more open world, so you at least had the ability to choose to go engage with those battles or not engage if you're not in the middle of a mission. Whereas on this, you can see them coming up ahead, so you have the opportunity to make sure that you're healed up and you've got the appropriate weapons and materia if you want to face those certain enemies, because 7 out of 10 times you usually have a good idea. If you fail a boss, for example, when you retry, it will obviously bring you just to the moment before that battle takes place if you want to change your itinerary. And I think they've really thought about how that makes it work. The downside is that on some of the side missions, for example, the squatting challenge or Tifa's pull-up challenge, if you fail, you have to go through the entire talking dialogue bit again to restart it. And if you try that for as long as I did, it's pretty frustrating to kind of do that until you finally beat it.
So we've touched briefly upon the combat system itself with the mix of action and the active time battle. So the way that works is you swing your sword or your fists or fire your gun and you build up a gauge, your ATB gauge, and when that's full you can then go into the options menu by pressing X, and that will slow time down to like a bullet time effect, and like you pick a more powerful attack. The attacks are through magic or abilities, which is acquired through something called materia, which if you've played the original you know very well. If you haven't, the materia system is coloured magic stones, essentially. Green ones have offensive magic and healing magic. Purple is, I think, passive. Yellow, or is yellow passive?
Yellow's just ad hoc, it's just like extra skills, extra specific
The
things.
materia system in this is really stripped down, I've found, compared to the original. So you put the materia into slots in your weapons and then you have access to those abilities and magic. But you don't have many slots in your weapons or your armor at first. You don't really have room to play around with combinations, and that's something that I found with this that was kind of annoying to me. You're so used to having X amount, but there was materia in this that's missing. Like, you went through the entire game without realising there was a version of the all materia.
Yeah, but it's not called all, so if you played the original, you have to...
You got to relearn it.
Yeah, you have to play around with things a bit more, and it has the same effects, and also the story doesn't allow you to buy those. You have to earn them through the story, through certain points, so you can only obtain one of certain materials in a single playthrough.
What I found that's really interesting as well is my materia setup has changed completely in hard mode than it did in normal mode. Because now it's all about stacking purples and trying to get as much magic points and magic power and hit points, and only picking a couple of offensive magics and everything else being support, just trying really hard to survive some of these encounters, and it makes you look at combat a little differently.
I think also onto the combat itself, generally I actually really liked it as well. Like, I think it's a perfect hybrid of the original and the new style, because there was a lot of criticism from Final Fantasy 15 that really you're just attacking and you can do a couple of moves, but if you want to heal you just use items. There wasn't any magic equivalent really. But I do think that this one takes the best of both worlds, because the thing is like the whole turn-based system, as many like traditional RPG fans absolutely love the turn-based system, it's fair to say that you can't really expect people in 2020 to want to play that style when you're talking about so many people. I mean, like, to make a game of this caliber takes, what, they announced it in 2015, so we've been waiting 5 years for this game, You know, I mean, like, we're talking absolutely millions being thrown into this, which means that the game needs to sell absolute millions. And in order to do that, the combat system needs to be something that's familiar to many people in terms of how they're used to fighting on pretty much any other game of similar caliber. But at the same time, they also knew that, you know, you've got so many hardcore fans that are familiar with the old system and going to see that ashamed to go. So they've really taken the time to learn about how can we make this hybrid system that allows you to fight in a more, you know, contemporary way, but at the same time use a system with the ATB Gorge to kind of replace the turn-based system to allow for, you know, you to use spells or to use certain abilities. The abilities I absolutely love, so we'll probably come to that in a moment. But I think in general that works really well. But then of course, in the downside of that is that because it's not a fully turn-based system anymore, it also means that you're within range to, like, maybe start a spell, and like your level 3 spells will take longer to activate than other ones, which means that they can be countered, which means that you lose your magic points and you lose your ATB, which means that you just have to start again. Of course, you can block for many things. I suck at blocking on this game. I and also the fact it's R1.
I'm getting quite good at blocking.
I know. I saw your Rush video. It's really good. But but the fact it's R1 doesn't help when you're usually mashing your face buttons there. I think if it was L1, it probably would have been more cognitively easier for me to deal with, so I just find myself dodging most of the time. But yeah, so I think like there's pros and cons to this. It's not perfect, but it's very enjoyable, and I think they've really nailed it. And of course, if you are just an absolute purist, it does give you the option to go for classic mode, where you can just keep it turn-based.
So the way classic mode works is the computer does all of your melee attacks for you. It's not completely turn-based. You still run into a battle, but then the AI takes over your party, allowing you to just focus on your abilities and your magic attacks. Yeah, that's a nice little system. Like a YouTuber that I watch and really respect, he actually went through the whole game like that. He's like, look, I'm not a big action guy. I went through it on classic mode, and you know, so there's 3 modes. Well, there's 4 modes, but there's like classic, easy, normal, and then you unlock hard. And I'm seeing a lot of people calling out easy mode for being too easy, and calling out people for playing on classic. And I'm not down with that gatekeeping at all. The fact that the difficulty settings are so diverse and there's such a big difference between each one, it means there is a difficulty setting there for everyone. So just enjoy the game. Just play the game and enjoy the game.
I would argue hard is too hard. It says to me because what Rick knows and no one else does is that I can't beat the Scorpion boss on Chapter 1 on hard. And I don't know why. I mean, like, everything else on the level was piece easy, but I think the main thing is that normal is challenging but fun. And I think there's, I managed to get through the game without too much issue. And I think for me, it's like it's a really good level which anybody can achieve. If you're not good enough yet, you have the opportunity to level up so you get good enough. There's not much grinding possibility in this, but they do replace it with Colosseums and whatnot to allow you to do that, which is, I believe that's what you did.
And then when you get to hard mode, if you haven't reached level cap, the amount of EXP that it throws at you is unreal. Like, you get thousands just for fighting regular mobs at the beginning, so it will power level you to level cap.
I think you probably reach your kind of mid to late 30s in the game level-wise just by doing the game, even if you don't do the side missions. And the side missions don't really give you much EXP anyway. It's just the battles that you encounter as part of those. But we'll come back to side missions in a moment. But going back to the battle system, I just want to talk about how much I love playing with Tifa. And I know that sounds out of context. That sounds really bad, but she is so fun. Like like just the combos that you can do, the abilities, like I think it's Stargazer. It's so much fun. It's just like visually just incredible to watch.
That's like her Omni Slash.
Exactly, but then at the same time, one thing about the ATB Gorge is that you basically have you can have 2 levels. So you've got ATB 1, ATB 2. If you get ATB 1, then you can do a spell or you can do an action. But if you can wait longer, And you have to attack to fill your ATB gorge up faster. But if you wait longer, then normally for most of the characters, like Barrett and Cloud and Aerith, you can get dual ATB abilities, which are basically stronger abilities. So if you can hold up for longer, it is worth it. For Tifa, she doesn't have any of those. They're all single ATB ones. The only difference being is the Unbridled Strength, which you can do 2 in a row, and if you do that, then if you get 1 ATB, you get the Omni Strike, and if you get 2, then you get the Rise and Fall, which means that you can basically hammer triangle about 3 times, and she'll give you this chain of attacks that she can do, which is an amazing way to defeat enemies when they're staggered. She is basically your finishing girl. She'll just finish them off for you so beautifully. It's so much fun, and I think this, like, she's the same reason why I love Cammy on Street Fighter, because she's just fast and agile, and she might not hit as hard, but she can really get in there and put some punches in. And I think for me, my brain is always running at 150% at all times anyway, so for me it's like got the speed that I need, which I always go for over power. Where Cloud, for example, like his Punisher mode is fantastic, but obviously the trade-off is that he slows down in his general movement, so if your enemy moves away, you have to go back to operator modes to do that, and you have to really kind of make sure you're in a good position to hammer those Punisher attacks in. Barrett has his Overstrike, which is great as well, but obviously you have to charge it, so you can't really do any other attacks while you're going. So while it is super powerful, you're basically hindered from really attacking him if you want to get that Overstrike again quickly. So I think, they've all got some really good trade-offs. Aerith, of course, is not so great at attacking, but she is useful for attacking enemies who are flying away from you, because she can still take health from them. But at the same time, she is the healer anyway, so that's if you can just kind of use her for long enough to get your ATBs up there and then use your prey ability, then that's always super helpful.
I found that Aerith's ATB goes up relatively quickly as well when attacking, and the thing is, she actually does more damage in this than I thought she would.
Yeah,
because I've been in the Colosseum, Cloud's got stunned, I've switched to Aerith, and then she's wiped everyone out.
Yeah.
She's more of a glass cannon, especially when her magic goes up. Like, she can do a lot of damage with magic.
And her second limit ability, which allows you to split her ATB into 3, which is actually super helpful if you want to be able to use the prey ability and then still have some ATB left to do a spell, for example. That's super helpful as well. So what she lacks for in some things, so like, again, it's just really well balanced between the characters. I think that's excellent. And I think we also need to talk about the limit breaks as well, specifically the level 2 limit breaks, because I was thinking, like, for ages, like, oh, there's no level 2 limit breaks, they just got rid of them. But then, by doing certain missions or defeating certain enemies, I believe you do get...
So it's the Colosseum.
It is the Colosseum, yeah. So you get their limit breaks, and it's so much fun. Again, Tifa's is just outed as well. Like, both of her limit breaks are fantastic. Both the Clouds are, to be fair. Interesting, they called them Legacy limit breaks. But yeah, I think they don't have as many limit breaks as they do in the original, and also because obviously you only at a certain part of the game, they obviously want to have, you don't want to get to Omni Slash on this game, when you've got so much more of the game to go. You really want to make sure that, they've got new limit breaks to offer players later in the in future releases. But at the same time, I think the 2 that they do give you are super powerful, and they don't carry over to your next fight, unfortunately, but it means that you've really got to work hard for them, and it just means it's all the more satisfying when you do get your limit break and you get it in and you see the damage it does. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that is the one problem that I've had with the limit breaks in this. They don't pop as often as they probably should do.
But they are fucking powerful.
Some of them, they are fight enders. They are absolute battle enders.
I mean, when I did Bahamut's, I managed to get like 1 limit break in from Cloud, 2 from Tifa, and that was enough to end it all. But then, of course, you've also got the summons as well. So, because the summon system has changed.
Yes, the summon system is very different. So the way that the summons work in this is you just equip them. You have a slot in your weapon that is just for summons.
Yeah. They're already at max level. There's no leveling up of summons either.
You'll be fighting, and then you'll see a summon gauge appear, and it will slowly fill, and then when it's full, you've then got X amount of time because it starts emptying again. But then you can during that time, you can summon but when you summon them in, it's one summon, and they join your party, essentially.
Yeah.
And then you start being able to use your ATB gauge to control them, to do more powerful attacks. And then when they leave, they do a big devastating attack. I only really ever used Ifrit.
I use Shiva quite a bit.
Yeah.
She was really helpful against Balmut as well. Again, similarly to this, that they have like single and dual ATB attacks, but because you're against a more formidable enemy before they appear, that's actually harder to do. So you really have to decide carefully about whether I'm going to do an ability, a magic spell, or I'm going to take advantage of the summon that's with me. And if you're trying to cure yourself or use a Phoenix down on someone, that's a really big, do I use the summon that's here with me for a limited period of time, or do I, try and heal myself or do a different attack because I can? Fortunately, all three of your characters can send commands to the summon, not just the person that did the summon. I quite liked it. Like, it prevents you from just overpowering everything, and it's like the game can just figure out, okay, yeah, like you're having a hard time with this one, summons coming your way, but either way, as you say, you still get that final attack. But if you have the ability to use your characters to send commands, obviously it can really help. But I only really ever use Shivrit and Shiver and Ifrit. So yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much everything on battles that I can think of, at least as far as my notes go. But it's it's not perfect, but like the good far outweighs the bad for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's just really fun. And even when it's annoying, it's still not that annoying. It's just I want to be better annoying rather than, oh god, the game's broken, because it's clearly not. They've really thought about this.
And even 50 plus hours in, I'm still trying to work out the minutiae of it, and I'm still discovering new things about it all the time and improving, which is great.
Yeah.
Like the fact that 50 plus hours in, I'm still getting more out of it.
It is still very much that kind of Dark Souls thing, isn't it? Get good.
Yeah.
Just get good. The only thing that did annoy me about the boss battles is when you're against like a really big boss, sometimes you'd have cutscenes in the middle of the fight and you can't skip them. Which if you're on it like your 8th time trying to like defeat it, you're like, I know cutscene, just let me just sort of like. And sometimes if you're in the middle of a move there, that might not always be honoured as well, which I thought was a little bit frustrating. But again, I mean, this is a small thing, and you could just get good. So, I mean, I think there's only a couple of things probably could talk about now. I mean, I think they're probably not going to talk about this too much, but graphics of the game, it's obviously amazing. The low-res textures, no, but there's a whole different boundary video.
I'm in a mixed bag about it, because initially, like, the opening mission is incredible. It's one of the best-looking things I've ever seen. And then, as the game goes on, it's a weird thing. Like, the environments look incredible. There's a point later in the game where they do start using 2D images as backgrounds, and they're not the best quality, which was really weird. They were quite... Did you notice those?
I noticed some when you were like on a spoiler area.
Yeah, they were quite jaggy. Like, they looked like they'd kind of been blown up a bit, so that was a bit weird. And that's fine though, because I'm a big fan of matte paintings as backgrounds in movies, and I was a big fan of the original backdrops in the original game. They just felt like a throwback to that. But yeah, I don't want to complain about the textures on the doors, because that seems to be the new meme. Everyone's moaning about that. It's a door. Who cares? Something that I did notice is that the character models for your party look absolutely incredible. And then you get the sub-characters who are like NPCs who are kind of important, and they look good. But then you get the regular NPCs who all just look like mannequins that have had a stroke with some really bad automated lip syncing, and like, they don't look great. They don't look bad.
But because there's a lack of consistency between your character and their character, it's like you know why. It's clearly like, they got to save polygons, and they've obviously the build time for each of the assets and stuff. It's important, but when but it's basically like Terrence and Phillip versus other South Park. All the Canadians are just even worsely drawn.
But I think it's not a 10 out of 10 game, so we do have to be honest about things that we've noticed. I don't think it matters, because I'd rather have a door with shitty textures and an NPC that looks like a mannequin if it means that I can have a battle with a huge monster with explosions going off like a motherfucker and no slowdown.
Yeah.
Because there was no performance drops at any point in this.
Are you on a pro or a regular?
I was playing on a regular.
Okay, so I was playing on a pro, and it was, it was exactly the same, I believe, but just higher. I think it's like 1600p or something. But it's like performance is just top notch. Yeah,
there was no screen tearing, there was no slowdown. It doesn't matter how crazy everything got, it stayed consistent, and that impressed the hell out of me, to be honest. So yeah, I'll take a slow loading door texture if it means that I can get...
My issue is it's sometimes it's just some of the textures were just clearly low res anyway, and they just didn't draw in at all. I mean, Digital Foundry did a whole video on this, and they come to the conclusion that it's just a bug that they just don't know why it hasn't been fixed yet. But it could just be a memory issue, that some of them just aren't pulling in for whatever reason. But I think, obviously, this is where something like PS5 and Xbox Series X are going to excel, because obviously we'll have solid state versions, and you'll be able to draw in assets so much higher res, and you just know they're going to re-release this game for those platforms. And I think it'll be interesting to see what they do, because I think it's an Unreal 4 game, so unlike FF15, which was their own custom engine, and I think that does mean that it's going to be scalable. And I do think that means they can scale up textures, they can scale up character detail. I think there's a lot of potential that we haven't seen on this game yet that I think next-gen consoles will definitely be able to unlock. And, Square are very aware of how many times I'm willing to buy this game, so I'll probably, end up just getting that as well. But I'll just be very curious to see how that works.
And that's the thing as well, like, I'd be happy, because it's Unreal 4, you said, they're scratching the surface with what they can do with real-time rendering with that engine at the moment. So they've got the engine now, which means that the next game shouldn't take as long as this one did to come out. And that's what I want. And I don't care if Part 2 looks like this, because this looks really good.
Yeah.
And running on next-gen hardware, it will look incredible.
Yeah.
So, it looks fine. It looks really good. And it runs really well. And the environments, the sector towns look incredible.
Yeah.
Some of the cutscenes are unreal. I think I noticed 2 or 3 actual fully rendered cutscenes instead of just in-game engine, and they look incredible anyway, because it's Square Enix animation team. They cannot make a bad looking cutscene. They've been killing it since
for so long.
Yeah, they've been killing it since 7.
Yeah.
And even I watched Advent Children the other day because I had to, and even though the film's a bit garbage, it still looks really good, and it's over 10 years old.
Yeah,
they make good looking films. So I was blown away at so many points by the visuals in this game.
Yeah,
the little, it sounds like moaning for the sake of moaning. But
no, but we have to nitpick and stuff.
Yeah,
so.
It is nitpicking.
I'm not going to go... I think the only other thing two other things I'd mentioned. One was characters, which I don't want to go too much into it, because obviously we start going to spoiler territory, but we've kind of mentioned that there is a lot of character development there. But I think we can actually talk about a few things here, like in terms of how we envisaged the characters in the original to how they are now, especially with the voice actors. Because, for me, Clouds, I've never really pictured a voice in my head, and there's something that I don't know how familiar you are with. I think you are probably more familiar with how they write characters, main characters. But there's a bit of a golden rule that whenever you have a main protagonist in anything like a cartoon or a novel or whatever, your main character is actually supposed to be a bit dull compared to the side characters. The other characters are always going to be more enriching than your main character, and I think a Cloud that's especially true, because you don't really know about his past. He's fairly blasé about stuff, and the reason they do that is because you need to visualize yourself as if I am the protagonist, as if this is my journey, this is my adventure, these are my friends. So I think it's kind of normal that your side characters are actually the ones with the backstories. They're the ones with the interesting points, and I think that's the thing. So when you kind of hear Cloud talking, it's it's Cloud, it's fine. He's kind of as you expect him to be, really, but he is just forgotten the word for it, really. He's just advised to just kind of fill yourself.
No, 2,000's enough. That's what we agreed on, so that'll be the price. With what you gave me, that leaves 1,500.
There's a huge change to Barrett that they've made, and I absolutely love it. In the original, Barrett was really abusive to the other members of Avalanche. He'd slap them around, he'd throw them around, he'd beat them up, he talked down to them. He talks down to Cloud, because Cloud isn't part of the cause. But in this new one, you can tell that he really loves the other members of Avalanche, and they're a family. And
he sort of threatens them, I'm going to whoop your ass kind of thing, but like that's about as far as it goes.
But he doesn't throw his weight around in an abusive way.
Yeah.
To say that Barrett is subtle is a really weird thing to say, because he's anything but subtle. But compared to how he's portrayed in the original, he is such a better character now, I feel.
Yeah. I think his voice is great. It's almost exactly as you imagined him to be as well. The gun in his arm just looks fantastic. It really shows that he's just a big asshole with a big heart.
Yeah.
And they say this much in the game. You have one of the NPCs kind of saying out like, "Oh, actually, when you get to know him, he's really chill." And it's like, even when he warms up to Cloud later, it's just kind of this friendly rivalry now. Again, we can talk about that more later, but it's I think his development is fantastic, and he starts off as a prick, but so does Cloud. So I think that works out really well.
Though you may not be crying out, I know you're in pain, just like the planet. But it's okay, because I'm here for you, to help take the load off your shoulders.
Then, of course, there's Tifa, and I wasn't 100% convinced by her voice at first, but then, I think half a chapter in, I was like, actually, no, this is Tifa. This is her. Her mannerisms are very anime girl, like there's a lot of like hand gestures and moving, like her hands onto her hips and talking, and very much kind of the wife that you will never have kind of attitude.
So then, what can I get you?
My money. I'm still waiting on it.
Right. About that, we should talk.
It's one of the things that I like about Aerith as well. Is her voice really, I think it really suits her, and I know people that don't really like her in this, but I'm in the camp of actually really liking her.
I really liked her, but I think her voice, at least to begin with, was very anime. It's very kind of high pitched, squeaky in a way. No, not like super squeaky, but like you can see that this is not her natural tone. You can see she's trying to play younger.
It definitely becomes more naturally sounding as the game goes on, because I find she has a lot of character development in a very short amount of time in this. And she goes from... So she's always been kind of aggressive, not in a... like... so I don't know if aggressive is the right word for it, but the way that she talks to Cloud, and she's always like, "Hi, like I like you. I'm going to talk to you like this." She's very like full on. And even though she's
very assertive.
Like intense, I think would be a good. Yeah. That can be a bit much at the beginning, but as it goes on, you realise that there's like she genuinely cares about these people, and even though she's only known them for like 5 minutes, she really cares for them and cares for their cause, and she quickly becomes an integral part of the team. Like the chapter that's just her and Cloud, there's a lot of growth, and like Cloud's really reluctant to let her in, but she won't take no for an answer. And there's something about that I just really appreciated. And you realise that Cloud definitely needs her there, because she is from the slums. She grew up in the slums. She gets it. She knows the rules of the slums, basically, and Cloud doesn't. And if it wasn't for her, then that mission wouldn't have gone off as it did. And I think that's the turning point where Cloud sort of realizes, like, oh yeah, maybe she is more than just a flower girl or a
Yeah,
flower
I mean,
peddler.
She is actually a bit of a dark horse as well. I mean, we were saying, like, it was kind of threw us back when we see her swear for the first time, and we were like, what? But when you see her in a Honeybee and she's really getting into it, and she's aware of worlds beyond that, she hasn't actually been cotton wools her whole life. You know, she is actually very aware, having grown up in the slums, what the world's about. She chooses to present herself in a certain way and to behave a certain way, but she does actually know the seedy underworld as well. She knows what Kenya is about. She knows what Wool Market's about. You know, she's not a princess in that way, and that's one thing I really likes about how they got her balance right.
Here, this is for you.
Huh? A flower?
That's right. It's a gift. You know, for scaring those things away.
So I think the only other thing then really is to go on to music.
Yeah.
Because I think like this is actually one of the biggest parts of this game that I'm sure like many people probably will and have discussed it, but it's not been that much of a talking point that I've seen yet. And I think, you know, like there's so much music in this. It's incredible.
Yeah. I'd love the music in this. It goes from being like a modern classic soundtrack in places, some of the best music in a Final Fantasy game for a while, whether it's a new piece for this game or like a remix and redone version of an old classic from the original game. They go from tracks that I want to listen to like all the time to the worst music on there is just kind of like forgettable background music. Like it's not offensive, it's not. Sometimes you hear a bad track and you're like, this is so bad that it, you know, if it's so bad it's memorable, that's when it's bad. But the worst in this is I don't really remember it. And you saying there's like so much music, it's crazy because the soundtrack's dynamic. They wrote and composed several different versions of each piece of music in it, overlaid it, like synced it up with each other, and then depending on what's happening on screen at the time, it'll
just dynamically segues in.
That just makes the world feel completely like alive, and it makes it feel.
So the battle music is kind of, you've got the battle music for each section. You know, it doesn't always go into the traditional music where it needs to, and I think that they do a really great job with that. I think like there's only like a couple that I wasn't really sold on, and like this is just me nitpicking really, is like one is the bombing mission on chapter 1.
Yeah.
I don't think it has the same charm as the soundboard on the PS1 version, and I know that's, you know, a bit weird to say, but there's just something about the certain sounds they used that just kind of really gave it a sense of identity. I didn't think Shinra's music was as good because it didn't have the choir, but when I listened to it on the CD version, because I got the mini soundtrack on my deluxe edition, it's actually like, if you allow it to be played loud, it is actually super cool, super powerful, and in as many ways I prefer it, but it does lose the kind of choir voices that they had for the Shinra music, whereas Sephiroth's, I think they tease it at the beginning of the game, and I wasn't entirely convinced by it, but when you see it later, you know, because you want that kind of bell piano hybrid sounds that is like so prominent, and I think they do a really good job with that later in the game. So that was awesome. The new music is fantastic. One thing we were discussing was Wool Market.
Yeah.
And I was trying to tell you how the notes of Wool Market is actually partly the same as A Whole New World on Aladdin.
I can show you the world.
I'm not a musician. I'm, you know, from a producer, so I'm still sometimes just hear melodies and like that's the exact same melody as that.
Wool Market's the best place to hear the dynamic soundtrack as well. When you're running around, as soon as you get near certain buildings, it will fade in and fade out depending on which character. Because there's so many different characters there, and there's so many different.
And there's so many different
like
musics that
almost,
all the music discs that you can get with the weird, like kind of tango versions of certain songs, or like
hip hop de chocobo.
I made sure that every jukebox was playing that song. I went to every single one. I put Hip Hop to Chocobo on,
Yeah.
just to make sure that was the track that the whole of Midgar slums is getting down to. But
Yeah.
I mean, the music at the Honeybee as well. I love the dance-off music. I really love some of the original music when Tifa's doing the monkey bars. Like, it starts off when, not going into the story part, but she falls and you get Tifa's kind of funky music, but then when she realizes she can like get to the next location using monkey bars and she's up for the challenge, it really feels like this is Tifa's moment, and it's really fucking cool. But I know one that we both agreed on was the music when you're doing the squats and the pull-ups in the gym.
That's probably my favorite piece of music in the game, to be honest. And it's,
how did he describe it?
It's like generic EDM. It sounds like it's the battle music that sounds like it was done by Pendulum.
Not bad at all. That's how it's done. I knew you could do it. Not bad at all. Your form's looking good.
And I love it. And it's gonna be on like regular circulation on my gym workout, on my gym playlist. It's gonna get there. It's as soon as the gyms are open again.
If I ever went to the gym, I might. But
I can't wait.
It's so good. It really makes you want to go for it. So I think they did an absolutely fantastic job there. So yeah, I absolutely love some of the new music, some of the rehashes, some of the reimaginings. When you're going through the slums, that was fantastic.
I loved it when you're going through the tunnel to get to Wall Market. Yeah. And you're going through the Bandits Lair, and that music, when that changes, it's such a good track. It's so good.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is like they've got like 7 discs of this coming out of the music. That's a lot. But even then, the mini soundtrack that I have is sort of, like 12 tracks or something, and it's like an hour long.
Well, that's all the vinyl is. So that special edition vinyl that I got, that's only 12 tracks, like 4. No, is it 12?
Yeah.
Or is it 16? I think it's 16. It's 4 per side, 2 discs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be
it's
I
crazy.
can do math.
I think even then, like the 7 discs, it's not going to include all the different tracks on here. It's not like I'm hoping that they'll put most of it on there, like because there's so much on there. I'm so buying the soundtrack for this. I absolutely love it. But there's enough to kind of get the nostalgia in there. There's enough like reimaginings and, as you say, the remix versions and just all the original music as well. It's just crazy, like how much effort's been put into this. I absolutely adore it. So
I would have liked just actual translations of the original music in the game at points, because I love the original score, the composition, but I don't like the instrumentation because it was limited by the PlayStation's sound chip. And even
but that's become part of the charm in some ways, so it's always going to be tricky.
Yeah, but listening back to it now, like I'm playing through it with my girlfriend at the moment, and there's certain tracks I'm like, this is so good that it's a shame that it doesn't sound good. And the original composer, like Uematsu, he even said himself that he doesn't like the instrumentation of it. He says it's his favourite soundtrack that he's ever written, but he doesn't like he's not happy with how it sounds because of the limitations of the PlayStation at the time. They hadn't figured out how to really pull everything out of the sound chip. So I would have liked to have had a more literal translation of some of the tracks in there, but I am happy with what we got.
So I think a fantastic job there, and I think also there's so much music that they haven't touched on, but of course that goes beyond Midgar, so they're keeping their cards close to their chest there, and I think they're right to do that.
Look, I'm involved in things. Dangerous things.
Oh, I'm sure you are. So
keep your distance.
To end then, what did you think? All in.
So all in,
final score.
Yeah, I mean, I think final score. I mean, in terms of enjoyment, it was 10. But I mean, if I'm going to play the critic, which I should, it's a solid 9 out of 10. Yeah. It's not perfect. The flaws are prominent enough to just let it down from the perfect score. But I just think I mark very harshly as well. Like,
Yeah.
it's almost insane to get 10 for me. So to give it a 9 is as good as it gets, I think, really. And the great just severely outweighs the bad. And I think apart from a few small things in the story and some of the things we've discussed in this video, I just generally, I just enjoyed it. It balanced it, hit all the nostalgic feels. It's really, really touched upon like how I think we both imagine this world, like how your mind fills in the blanks, and made's just an incredibly enjoyable game that's just fit for this generation.
No, I agree. Mine is a solid 9 out of 10 as well. It would have been higher, but for me, it didn't really stick the landing. So we'll talk about that in the spoiler video.
Yeah.
But as an update to one of my favourite games, I think it's absolutely incredible. It weirdly looks exactly how I remember the original did in 1997 when I played that for the first time. It's captured the imagination of 12-year-old me absolutely perfectly. I love the new combat system. I love the new characterizations of people. I love a lot of the world building that's happened in it, the new soundtrack that's in it. There are technical issues, but as I said earlier, I will take a door with dodgy textures if it means that the insane combat will run without a flaw. Story elements that we'll get into next time that I wasn't a fan about, and honestly it's just those elements that bring it down for me. So yeah, that's what stops it being like a 9.5, but it is an absolute solid 9 out of 10. I cannot wait for the next game, whenever it will come. Hopefully it will be a lot sooner than it took this one to come out.
Yeah, we'll see. I think we got a lot to discuss in that one, but
yeah,
I think let's do that for them. But I'm good to wrap up. I think I've said pretty much everything I need to on this. So, but yeah, incredible effort, Square. You've taken 70 hours of my week, and I'm not sorry.
So that's what we think to the Final Fantasy VII Remake. If you played it, if you have, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to know what you think about it, and make sure that you come back for the spoiler video. Yeah, so thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.